By autumn 1823, 43 students lived and studied there. They rose before dawn, prayed twice daily, ate in silence, and studied scripture, Greek, Latin, theology, and church history until their eyes burned with fatigue. This was a place of rigid routine, of discipline, devotion, and secrets. The oldest student was Marcus Hartwell, 28, a former schoolteacher, widowed young, thoughtful, serious, respected. The youngest was Timothy Brennan, barely 18, son of Irish immigrants. His mother had sewn clothes for 4 years to send him here. There was cheerful Samuel Brewster from a Lancaster farm. Soft-spoken Peter Cunningham, raised by his grandfather after fever took his parents. James Morrison, a gifted linguist from a wealthy Philadelphia family. And Thomas Milliken, a brilliant but inquisitive student from Pittsburgh. Curious, restless, a thinker who asked the kinds of questions that made professors uncomfortable. The seminary's head was Dr. Cornelius Ashford, stern but fair. A Princeton scholar, now charged with shaping these boys into ministers. His wife, Margaret, offered warmth to the students. Their daughter Sarah, just 18, was intelligent, kind, and beloved by everyone. She often helped in the library and knew more theology than most graduates. Witmore seemed a place of learning, order, and piety. Until that first snowfall in November, when everything changed. December 3, 1823. Thomas Milliken did not come to morning chapel. That alone was strange. He'd never missed a service. Ever. His roommate, David Crane, went to check on him. What he found would mark the beginning of the horror. Thomas was writhing in bed, his body bent in unnatural angles, back arched like a drawn bow. His limbs spasmed so violently it took 3 men to hold him down. He was speaking, but the words made no sense. They poured from his mouth in a torrent of guttural syllables. Some sounded like Latin, but twisted, like a holy text turned inside out. David couldn't look away, because it wasn't the words that chilled him. It was Thomas's hands. His fingernails had turned pitch black. Dr. Ashford rushed in, pale with shock. A messenger was sent through the snow to summon the town doctor, Dr. Edmund Whitley. By the time Whitley arrived, Thomas's condition had worsened. His skin had turned a strange gray. His breath came in rasping whistles. Black patches bloomed across his face like bruises from within. The Latin grew clearer. Dominus viscum, infernum. Corpus diaboli, anima peritita. Dr. Ashford understood Latin. These were not prayers. They were blasphemies. Twisted versions of sacred phrases. Inversions of holy rites. Dr. Whitley tried everything. Bleeding. Laudanum. Ice. He even attempted to purge poison, but the bile was black and foul, stinking of sulfur and decay. Thomas's body rejected everything. And then, at exactly 3 a.m. the next morning, he stopped convulsing. His eyes fluttered open. For a moment, clarity returned. He looked at Dr. Whitley with a mix of terror and pleading, and whispered, the book in the chapel. God forgive us all." Then he died. The blackness faded from his skin within minutes. A funeral was held 2 days later. They said goodbye. They prayed. But nothing felt normal anymore. Something had shifted. The air was heavier, and the dead man's final words echoed in the minds of everyone who heard them. The book in the chapel. They tried to return to routine, to pray, to study, but fear hung over Witmore like a storm cloud. Then, 6 days after Thomas's death, it happened again. December 9, 1823. At exactly 3 a.m., the same time Thomas had died, James Morrison began to scream. His roommate woke to violent thrashing. The same convulsions. The same black fingernails. The same guttural Latin spilling from his mouth. Corpus diaboli, anima peritita. The seminary froze. Some cried. Others dropped to their knees in prayer. Dr. Whitley rushed to the scene, his hands trembling as he examined James. It was all identical. Same progression. Same symptoms. Same phrases. Word for word. The others watched, horrified, as James followed Thomas's exact path. Right down to the slow gray of his skin. The black patches on his hands and neck. Dr. Whitley's medical knowledge failed him again. This wasn't disease. It was a script. One being followed to the letter. And then, at exactly 21 hours after it began, James opened his eyes. With perfect clarity, he whispered, the book in the chapel. God forgive us all." Then he died. The community broke. There was no pretending anymore. 2 students. Dead. Same symptoms. Same last words. Same time. And now the rumors began. Some whispered of poison. Others of judgment. But a few, quietly, spoke of something darker. Dr. Ashford ordered more chapel services. He begged the students to hold fast to reason. But it was already too late. Witmore Seminary was no longer a place of learning. It had become a waiting room for death. December 12, 1823. 3 days after James Morrison died. It happened again. This time, it was Samuel Brewster, the strong, cheerful farm boy who always had a joke on his lips and a kind word for everyone. Until that morning. At exactly 3 a.m., Samuel screamed. By the time help arrived, his fingernails were already black. He was convulsing on the floor, froth at his mouth, his eyes rolled back. His voice, guttural and strange, uttered the now familiar Latin. Students burst into tears. Some ran from the room. Others simply froze. Samuel had been the healthiest of them all. His decline was a mirror of the first 2. Dr. Whitley took notes this time, compulsively. Every minute. Every symptom. The discoloration of the hands. The fever that surged and dipped. The exact timing of the black bile. Even the twisted phrases, repeated word for word. And once again, 21 hours later, Samuel awoke from his stupor. He looked at the ceiling and whispered, "The book in the chapel. God forgive us all." Then he died. That made 3. 3 students. 3 identical deaths. 3 final words. The precision was inhuman. The seminary fell into chaos. Students begged to leave. Some refused to eat. Others stayed awake for nights, too afraid to close their eyes. Professor Hartley's classes fell silent. Professor Sterling's sermons were met with blank stares and trembling hands. Faith was turning to fear. And the question that haunted every student was simple. Who would be next? 3 deaths in 9 days. All identical. All inexplicable. Witmore Seminary was collapsing from the inside. Dr. Ashford wrote a desperate letter to the Presbyterian authorities in Philadelphia. Their response was swift. On December 15th, Reverend Dr. Jonathan Blackwood arrived. A man of calm authority, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. He had overseen crises before, scandals, outbreaks, heresies. But what he found at Witmore unsettled him. Dr. Whitley recounted the deaths in excruciating detail. The timing, the Latin, the phrase, the book in the chapel. Blackwood said nothing at first. He simply nodded, then ordered the entire seminary into quarantine. No one in, no one out. Letters were sent to families. The chapel was sealed. The dormitories fumigated. And every student who had been close to the victims was placed under observation. But it wasn't enough. Because on December 18th, 3 days after Samuel's death, Peter Cunningham fell. The quiet, intensely pious young man. A student known for his long prayers and strict fasting. At 3 a.m., the screams began again. Dr. Whitley arrived to the now familiar horror. Convulsions. Blasphemous Latin. Blackened fingernails. The doctor took notes furiously, even as his hands shook. The words were the same. The tone. The progression. Even the final timing, 21 hours later. And yes, Peter's final words were exactly the same. The book in the chapel. God forgive us all. By now, the pattern was undeniable. And something else had become clear. This was not random. This was ritual. Blackwood ordered a deeper investigation. And though Dr. Ashford resisted, something had changed in him. Fear had cracked his rationalism. The whispers of the students, the cold that seemed to cling to the walls, the way the snow no longer felt like a blessing but a veil. They all knew. Whatever this was, It wasn't done yet. December 20th. The seminary was gripped by terror. Students no longer spoke in hushed tones. They wept openly. Some refused to eat. Some clutched Bibles like lifelines. Some began to sleep in groups, too afraid to be alone when the clock struck 3 a.m. That night, the silence broke. A knock came at Dr. Whitley's door. It was David Crane, the only one who had been present at every death. Thomas's roommate, Samuel's confidant, Peter's friend. His hands trembled. His eyes were hollow. "I need to tell you something," he whispered. What David revealed changed everything. He confessed to a secret study group. 6 students, including the 4 who had already died, and himself. They had been meeting in the chapel after evening prayers, studying a book that Thomas Milliken had found, hidden behind the altar. It was like nothing they'd ever seen. Bound in what looked like human skin. Pages of brittle parchment, written in Latin, Hebrew, and strange symbols they couldn't identify. It wasn't in the library. It wasn't in any curriculum. They didn't report it. They studied it. The book spoke of spiritual power, of transcendence, of divine knowledge not found in Scripture. At first, it was mesmerizing. Their prayers became deeper, their dreams vivid, their studies sharper. But soon, things changed. They began to suffer. Headaches, insomnia, dark thoughts, cravings for raw meat. Thomas, once the most brilliant of them all, was consumed. He stopped sleeping. He claimed to hear voices in languages no one else could understand. He said they were being chosen, prepared for a higher calling. David's voice cracked as he spoke. He and the others believed they were unlocking sacred truths. But slowly, their faith turned into arrogance. They began to look down on other students. Mock professors, claimed divine insight. Then came the night of November 30th. They went to the chapel. The book was gone. The compartment, empty. Thomas panicked. He accused others, grew paranoid. And 3 days later, he began to die. And now, only 2 members of the group remained. David and Marcus Hartwell. December 21st. The frost hung thick on the chapel windows. And at precisely 3 a.m., the pattern struck again. This time, it was Marcus Hartwell. The eldest. The wisest. The one who had doubted the group's path. Now, he was screaming. Dr. Whitley arrived breathless. The same scene repeated for the 5th time. Convulsions that snapped the body like a whip. Skin turning gray. Fingernails black as pitch. Latin words spilled from Marcus's mouth like acid. But this time, they weren't quite the same. He didn't mention the book. Instead, he whispered over and over, "We are chosen, marked, for the harvest." It sent a chill deeper than any snowfall ever could. At exactly 21 hours, Marcus fell silent. His final breath rattled in his throat. And with that, only David Crane remained. The last of the 6. The only one still breathing. Now the truth was undeniable. This wasn't disease. It wasn't coincidence. This was a ritual. And David was next. Dr. Blackwood ordered an immediate search of the chapel. What they found confirmed their worst fears. A hidden compartment behind the altar. Wax residue. Burn marks. Strange symbols carved into stone. They found Marcus's notes, copied from the book now missing. Passages about divine ascension, spiritual transformation. And something else. A ritual that required 6 vessels. To serve as conduits. To die. One by one. December 22nd. David Crane could feel it now. The burning in his stomach. The whispers in his dreams. The blackness creeping beneath his fingernails. He didn't wait. That night, he made his way into the basement of the seminary, past broken furniture and stone walls long forgotten. And there, behind a bricked-up alcove, he found it. A hidden chamber, untouched for decades. Inside were journals, ritual tools, and documents covered in dust. And with them, the truth. Josiah Witmore, the man the seminary was named after, was no martyr. He had been a Presbyterian minister once. Ordained. Respected. But history had been rewritten. Because the real Josiah Witmore was a heretic, a man consumed by occult practices. In 1781, he had performed a ritual in his church, one eerily similar to what the students had unknowingly recreated. It required 6 participants, each meant to serve as vessels to open a gateway between worlds. All 6 died within hours. Blackened limbs. Blasphemous speech. The same symptoms. Witmore was arrested, tried for witchcraft, and executed in 1782. But before his death, he hid his grimoire, a handwritten book of rituals and forbidden knowledge. He hid it on the land that would, years later, become the seminary. The founders of Witmore Seminary never knew. They believed they were honoring a hero. Instead, they built their institution on cursed ground. And the students? They had resumed the ritual Witmore began. 6 vessels. 5 were already dead. And the last one was David. December 23rd. David Crane was out of time. The burning in his chest had worsened. He hadn't slept in days. Voices spoke to him constantly now, some in languages he almost understood, others in tones that made his bones ache. But in the grimoire, he had found one final hope. A way to break the ritual. He brought everything to Dr. Whitley and Dr. Blackwood. The hidden chamber. The documents. The truth about Josiah Witmore. And the instructions for a counter-ritual. It wouldn't be easy. They had to destroy the grimoire, page by page, while invoking sacred scripture to sever the spiritual ties. It had to be done in the chapel, where the original ritual had been performed. And worst of all, David himself had to be present. That night, under heavy snow and deep silence, 4 men entered the chapel. David Crane, the last vessel. Dr. Blackwood, the spiritual leader. Dr. Whitley, the reluctant witness. Dr. Ashford, the man who had tried so hard not to believe. The air inside the chapel was wrong. Colder than the wind outside. Heavier than stone. The candles flickered though no air moved. Shadows stretched across the walls, but there was nothing casting them. David stood at the center of the room. A circle drawn in chalk. Candles lit. Incense burning. The grimoire opened before him. Dr. Blackwood began to read. Psalm 91. Ephesians 6. The Lord's Prayer. Then came the burning. Page by page, the grimoire turned to ash. And with each page, the room twisted. The walls groaned. The shadows deepened. The floor trembled with a low grinding sound, like something below wanted to come through. David screamed. His voice wasn't his anymore. It boomed, doubled, guttural, not human. His eyes rolled back. His hands darkened. But he kept chanting. He didn't stop. As the final page turned to flame, David let out a roar that shook the chapel's very frame. His body convulsed. The shadows pulled back. The air cleared. And then, stillness. David collapsed. Unconscious, but breathing. The blackness faded from his skin. The ritual had been broken. David Crane survived that night. But he would never be the same. His body healed, but not his soul. He refused to speak of what he'd seen during the ritual, only that he had looked into something and barely escaped. He never married. Never had children. Never again sought greatness in the ministry. Instead, he lived simply. Preached humility. Warned of spiritual pride. Avoided any teaching that hinted at special revelation. Witmore Seminary closed within months. The official reason? Accessibility issues. But those who were there knew the truth. 15 young men had died. And not from plague, but from spiritual ambition. The chapel was converted into a home. The unmarked graves were moved and forgotten. The story, sealed, buried, classified. Dr. Ashford resigned. He spent the rest of his life preaching in a small town, never again speaking of what happened. His sermons grew darker. Cautious. Professor Hartley and Professor Sterling left quietly. They pushed for stricter oversight of students in every institution they later served. Dr. Whitley, the man of medicine, never recovered. He turned to alcohol. Was plagued by nightmares of black fingernails and twisted prayers. He died in 1835, haunted and broken. Dr. Blackwood returned to Philadelphia. He became the church's quiet authority on spiritual corruption. And he never, ever told the full story. The land stayed quiet after that. The ritual had been broken. The evil, sealed. But the house that once was a chapel? Even now, people say it feels cold. Heavy. Like something ancient was once disturbed there. And maybe still remembers. For nearly 2 centuries, the story of Witmore Seminary faded into dust. A footnote. A myth. A forgotten tragedy buried beneath polite silence and institutional fear. Until one day, in 2019, in a Pennsylvania attic, a descendant of David Crane opened an old cedar trunk. Inside, letters. Dozens of them. David had written to his family throughout that dark winter. He described the early days with hope. Then confusion. Then terror. And finally, confession. He wrote of Thomas, of the grimoire, of the shadows, of the screams. Of how knowledge can poison. Of how spiritual pride dressed itself in the robes of righteousness. He wrote of what it meant to be marked. And what it cost to be freed. Historians later uncovered sealed medical notes. Church archives. Whispers of a truth long hidden. Some claimed the deaths were mass hysteria. Others suggested poison. A few dared to say the truth aloud. They opened something. And it almost didn't close. Today, the house still stands. People live there. They laugh. They eat. They sleep. But sometimes, when snow falls heavy and the wind is just right, visitors say the old chapel room feels colder than the rest. Not haunted. Just watched. Witmore Seminary is gone. But its lesson still echoes. The most terrifying evil often begins with the sincerest intentions. The road to damnation is paved with the desire to do God's work.